It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilley.
Hi, and welcome to the show. Today, my guest is Vashti Summervill. Vashti doesn't easily fit into one box. She is an educator, PCI, certified parent coach, an author, a therapeutic consultant, a mindfulness-based stress reduction instructor, and a musician. Vashti is an avid lifelong learner with a heart for doing her part to ease suffering and build community. It's a hard time to grow up, and it's a hard time to be a parent. The question she is continuously asking is, what can we as parents do to cultivate resilience in the world we find ourselves in? Vashti is on a journey to combine her background as an educator, her lived experience, and continual learning to help support parents, especially those struggling in their relationship with teens and young adults. When she isn't doing this work, she can be found writing songs and performing with her band. So, okay, let's get to the interview now with Vashti Summervill on today's edition of Success is Subjective. Vashti, I'm super excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for the invitation, Joanna.
I'm super excited. Let's just dive right in because I don't think I know your complete story. I mean, obviously we talk a lot often about some of the young adults that we work with. So kind of doing case consult stuff, which is exciting for me. But you've got a lot of irons in the fire, and I want to make sure that we have time to talk about that. But going back to it, where did you actually grow up and kind of what was your journey through young adulthood?
Yeah, so I'm a Colorado native, I think like fifth generation Colorado girl. But when I was in second grade, I moved to Wyoming. Not many people live in Wyoming, but my father died when I was in elementary school. And I think, my mom just needed a fresh start. She needed to get away. So I lived in Wyoming from third grade until I graduated from high school. And then I went back to Colorado for college. And, music has always been an enormous part of my life. And so I was studying music as, at 18 through a bachelor's degree in Colorado and really was focused on performance and then kind of got hooked on teaching as well and directing. And so that was a lot of my previous life prior to working in mental health. Do you want me to kind of tell you how I transitioned out of teaching into mental health?
Sure. But I also think it's important for people to know, you just kind of hinted at this, oh yeah, I got this degree in music. Yeah. I was kind of doing things. People can hear your work. Where can they hear you?
Yeah, well, and I actually did. I love music so much. I do think it was a big part of sort of helping me through the grief of losing a parent, kind of having a piano become my best friend for a while, right? And I ended up going to graduate school for music. So this is not just a small part of my life. This is a very huge part of my life. And yeah, I did a kind of a bucket list thing last year. I recorded an album of original music that's on all the streaming services, Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, Amazon Music, all those places. And I wanted to write an album's worth of songs that sounded retro, that sounded almost like 1940s standards. So that was fun. I did it. It's out in the world. It's birthed.
And even a movie picked it up and it was in a movie, right? Am I making this up? Come on. I feel like I need to put the spotlight on your accolades here.
So there are 3 songs in a movie, but the movie I don't think has been sold yet. I think it's probably will land with Hallmark or Lifetime, but it has not been sold in the United States. I do know the movie was released in Croatia and France and Italy, but I haven't seen anything in the United States and I've never seen it. So,
all right. Well, maybe that was a premature shout out, but we will make sure that the link is in the show notes for people to listen to your album because I think that's super cool. Like you said, that was a big part of your earlier life, yet here we are full circle if you actually recorded a full original album just last year, which is so cool. So all right, I'm obviously jumping all over the place. fill us in and kind of like, how did you actually go from a master's, right, graduate education in music to what it is that you're doing now, which also includes the role of a parent?
Yeah. So, I discovered in my 20s that I also loved teaching and directing, whether that was musical theater or, just teaching kids, especially in group settings, voice or percussion or piano. And I really connected with that. And so I had kind of a winding teaching road. I'm based in Boise, Idaho now, and I did end up teaching in a charter school for several years. And then I had my own music school with a little over 100 students, and I loved it. We had a great time. I think it was a really unique model. I would say I teach human beings through the tool of music, right? So I really cared about these students as humans and their journey. And I was noticing some pretty big changes in students over the years, just more depression and anxiety, more students on medication, more behavioral issues, just a lot going on. And I would say at about the same time, the rubber was hitting the road in my own parenting journey as, my kids were hitting those junior high years. And then, we had a lot of struggles and, we don't get a playbook for this as parents, right? A lot of this stuff that we see professionally isn't in the what to expect when you're expecting. So we're really just doing the best we can with the tools that we have, which often is how we were parented, right? So I think after we went through some things, I just thought, how can I combine all these years in education with my lived experience to be that person we needed during our most challenging times? And so I love school. So I went back to school again to become a parent coach, and then, started on the path to become a consultant and just kind of combined it all. And I always say it's my work with a capital W now. It's like life called me to do this. I would have never predicted this is where I would be now.
Well, and it also includes your most recent announcement, which is also writing. Can you tell us a little bit about the book that you just released? I mean, literally within the last 30 days.
Yeah.
And here I am holding up the hard copy because as soon as I got it, I just like immediately was tearing through it because it's such a page turner and it's so raw. But you tell us about the book.
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. It is raw, and it's a really different kind of parenting book that came to be in just kind of an organic way. I always thought, oh, maybe I'll write a parenting book with, I always say I'm a creator, not a maintainer. I love to create things. And I'm always sort of like, what's that next thing I can create? But, there's a lot of parenting books out there. I didn't know that, if I had anything really unique to say. And then I ended up reconnecting with someone who lives on my street, who's a visual artist. And she expressed, she said, I've really been wanting to use my visual art in the realm of mental health, mental wellness. And I said, I've been wanting to do this parenting book. And we also had some parallel personal experience, right, on our parenting journey. So we just sort of started this project. So the book's written in first person. It's called Letters from the Wilderness of Modern Parenting. Although it has nothing to do with wilderness therapy, I have to tell people in our world that. But it's really just that navigating that wilderness of adolescence and young adulthood and parenting through that. And so it's just 34 letters written as if a parent is speaking to a child. It's really a kind of an amalgamation of personal experience and then professional and cultural observations. And each one of the letters has a really beautiful linoleum block print, black and white piece of art that goes with it that I think really helps the reader explore the layers of and the complexities and the dynamics of their situation in a really unique way. And I think the first person also makes it raw, makes it vulnerable. It is unique, but I think the goal is for everyone to feel seen, right? I think parents that read something in that first person say, wait a minute, I'm not on this island alone, feeling like I'm the only one not getting this right. And wait a minute, I can look at my kid through this reframe. And we've even had some teens and young adults pick up this book and they say, it's so relatable. And this is how I wish I was seen. And wow, I didn't really take into consideration my parents' experience. So it kind of goes both ways. And it's been a really rewarding and unique project that once again, it's out in the world and we'll see what happens.
Well, and again, I can attest. I read it. It is absolutely a page turner. It felt very poetic and real to me, and I can see how it would be like a great perspective. It could be a great awareness for raising that or understanding that perspective for a child or young adult to understand what their parent's going through, and vice versa. A parent kind of narrating, here's my experience, kind of talking through the frustrations, or like you said, the wilderness of being a parent in these modern times. I want to actually use that same word, which is going to be obnoxious. When I think about wilderness, I think about like uncharted territory, right? Like we picture potentially dense woods or forests or mountains and like, just challenging terrain. So here I am going to be super, super cheesy in this moment, Vashti. So bear with
Okay.
me. If you were in your own kind of like the wilderness that has been your life, is there anything that you would do differently as you have navigated those kind of, again, treacherous or vistas or, like whatever the experience was? Is there anything you would do differently?
Yeah, I think, I often speak about this and I think I talk about it in the book a little bit. I wish someone had set me down at a young age and said, here's the deal, like there's normal life suffering, right? Life is not always supposed to be smooth sailing. And the normal life suffering is what shapes us. And we don't have to be scared of it. It doesn't have to create anxiety or additional suffering if we can sort of welcome that. And I wish I'd been taught that so I could just be like, okay, here's a challenge. This challenge is going to shape me. It's going to make me stronger. So I wish I had that mindset earlier, right? And not taking everything so seriously, not taking myself so seriously, and not believing all my thoughts, right? I talk about this a lot in the book. My thoughts are not facts, right? Our brains are like a runaway train a lot of the time. So I think just I wish I had that perspective earlier so I could have walked through the world with a little more ease instead of having to, I guess, learn things the very hard way sometimes.
Yep. No, that makes perfect sense. Having heard your story, let me back up. Now that you have kind of shared literally the high points, right, of some of these experiences that, like music being a conduit, right, for you to heal through that grieving process as a young person into young adulthood, then obviously transitioning or being like paying attention to what you said, like the capital W, right? The work that you were called to do, which for anybody that's listening and not actually looking at the video, you can see it on Vashti's face. She's like glowing. Like this is very much her calling, which is so cool to see also your experiences really formulate or come to be like where you are and what it is that you're doing right now. With that said, and also again, shameless plug and adding the like book author to that like growing title of all the things. Do you see yourself as successful?
I do. I think I measure success. As I've released these things, it is very vulnerable to release original music or a book, especially this book. And I think my definition of success is that I did it, right? That I have this body of work, this thing that I created. And I think I heard what's his name? Ryan Holiday on the Daily Stoic podcast. I like him. And he read some Stoic philosophers, thing. I'm going to paraphrase badly that, our job is to do the work, right? And what the world does with it is really none of our business. And so my measure of success has to be that I did the work, right? I did it. And I think there's a lot of learning that comes with it. I guess with the music stuff, of course, you want attention as a songwriter or performer. I think with the book, it is a little more aligned right now with that capital W for me, because I just see this suffering, right? And I just want some help out there, more help, right? I think we need more perspectives and more ways of helping families who are suffering in really big ways now. So I think if it helps one or two people, it's a success. So yeah, I think my definition of success is that I set a goal and I did it. Where it goes from here, who knows?
Well, you did it, right?
Exactly.
So let me actually just use that as like a next jumping off point, because as a therapeutic consultant, we're often working with young adults and parents
who are standing right on the edge, right? That fear sometimes can be paralyzing. The parent saying, I don't know how to help my child, and so that the taking that step forward, providing support is challenging. On the flip side, that young adult or the child that we're talking about in this exact example is terrified of what's to come. So if you could give maybe one piece of advice, and you could tailor it to the parent or the young adult, or you could, give both if you wanted to. I'm just thinking, like, for somebody that's afraid of just doing it, right? Doing that work, just putting it out, and then, what the world does with it, that's out of our control. What advice would you give that person?
Gosh, I mean, I think there's so many complexities here, right? And I think both parents and kids can feel really paralyzed. But I also think we get really stuck in our stories about one another. And I use this quote quite a bit: the core of the relationship with the child is the way they believe you see them. And you could probably flip that too, like the core of the relationship with the parent is the way they believe you see them. And I think our stories, we have to be really careful of our narratives, right? I talked about thoughts are not facts and not taking things so seriously. And I think that applies on this journey too, because we can get so stuck in the fear and the anxiety. I mean, and the elephant in the room is we're afraid our kid's going to die. That's the elephant in the room, right? That's what's driving so much of this, because, there is so much suicidality that it either wasn't talked about or it didn't exist in the numbers that it does now, like back when I was in high school, right? And so we're making a lot of decisions from a place of fear and anxiety. And I think it starts to feed these stories, right? These narratives that are really coming from a place of the struggle. And so how can we start to intentionally focus on the narratives from a strengths-based perspective, right? Because it's really easy to lose sight in the relationship and with each other, with the parent-child, child-parent, and with ourselves. It's really easy to lose sight of the strengths and the things that are going right because we're just looking through that lens of challenge and struggle. And then it kind of becomes this weird, like self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, right? And so I think that's the advice: is how do we step out of the struggle, have some levity, approach life with a little bit more lightheartedness, right? And just see how that starts to shift the trajectory and start focusing on some of those things that are actually working and going well. It's not all broken.
Amen to that. That was like, we could be done right there, right? That's the end. That advice will help so many people. So I appreciate you sharing that. Again, I think a lot of what I appreciate about you and in what it is that you're talking about in this moment, and also in the conversations that we have, off the podcast recording times. And also in your book, it's all about perspective. Everything seems to be about perspective. So if we actually pause for a minute and we're trying to assess, like what is going on, right? Or what is that other person thinking or feeling? I think it's a lot of it is about the shift that needs to happen. And so I appreciate you really bringing that to the forefront in a lot of the work that you do. So I'm going to pivot quickly too, because I want to make sure we have an opportunity. Your capital W work is parent coaching and therapeutic consulting, mostly with young adults, which is also what I do. And so obviously I'm like geeking out to have somebody else in this space with me. I'm not going to ask the question, like, hey, if you had a therapeutic consultant, would you use them? Because that's silly. But what I think is a question that our listeners would benefit in hearing is, what do you view as the benefit or benefits of working with a therapeutic consultant?
Yeah, I think it's, I'm part of a team, and I am I'll put in air quotes, young adult specialist. I don't know if I'm a specialist. I'm always learning, and so our team does work with adolescents too. And I think the unique part about getting to work with young adults is that young adults have to make the choice to do this. And so I think the benefit, one of my favorite parts, and you can probably attest to this too, is getting to build a little bit of rapport and relationship with that young adult, and having someone help you walk through opportunities that aren't your parent, right? Because usually at this point, and this is all of us, right? I point the finger at myself. I'm in the big messy boat with everyone. I teach this stuff, I talk about this stuff, but I still struggle with this stuff. It's not easy, right? But I think when you can have kind of a third party that's not so emotionally involved or invested to really look at you through both your strengths and struggles and your self-identified barriers and listen to you. They don't have a history with you, build that relationship. I think there's probably a real opportunity, right? For openness and helping connect that young adult with things that really align, helping them feel heard by someone who, once again, who isn't a parent, just because that's the nature of the parent-child relationship. Sometimes I've heard kids, including my own, say, well, I was going to do that until you asked me to, right? That's just the journey of the parent-child and individuating, right? And so I really think young adults just having that person in their court, right? That team member that's like, I'm here and I'm going to be with you throughout the journey. And I think it's my very favorite thing when that rapport and relationship starts to happen and feel meaningful and you feel like a meaningful part of the team.
I think that's probably the way you just described that. I'm not going to say that I am nearly as eloquent as you in describing the work that we do, but I just kind of lit up as I was hearing you kind of highlight the key points, especially in working with young adults, that ability to build rapport, to be kind of an objective party in the process where, again, you're like along the journey with them. It lights me up thinking like, this is my big W, hearing you talk about your calling. So that fire is kind of being stoked a little bit for me as you're describing the work that you do. And so I just am reflecting in what it is that you're describing. Like, we are very similar in our approaches, and I appreciate you for the work that you do, because it is evident that this is what you are supposed to be doing, right? What you're meant to be doing.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. And I have so much to learn from you, Joanna. I'm so grateful that we are colleagues, right? And that you pick up the phone when I call. I'm so grateful for that, because I couldn't do this without great colleagues like you.
Call me anytime. Well, I just want to say thank you for carving out a little bit of time on your busy schedule to share a little bit of your personal story, and then obviously talk about kind of some of the professional highlights of what it is that you've got going on, and then weaving in some advice and just like some good life spice along the way. So we'll make sure that we've got all of the links to everything, book, Spotify to hear your music, as well as the team that you work with. So if anybody's listening and they're interested and they want to connect with you, then I want to make sure that they do that. So easy access right in the show notes. And because this is such a short interview, I feel like it's an invite then for people that are piqued, right? Interests that are piqued to take that leap and initiate a conversation to engage, whether it's a parent, whether it's a young adult, whether it's somebody who has always been thinking that maybe one day they'll write a book. It feels like this brief intro to you as a human being, hopefully is a call to action for them to take a step for themselves or to engage with you to make that step for themselves. So thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you, Joanna. And thanks for all the work you do in this world. It's really important.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. Put a face with a voice by accessing their interview on the newly formed successissubjective.org website. If you are interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email Joanna at joanna@successissubjective.org. Be sure to check out the collegealternative.org and lilyconsulting.com websites for additional resources outside of podcasting. If you are listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe to the show. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Last but not least, Success is Subjective is listener supported, made possible by our team and by you. You can support this podcast by joining the Patreon community at patreon.com/successissubjective. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.
Do you have a teenager or young adult who seems to have lost their way? Maybe they need help navigating adolescence, adulthood, and decisions surrounding higher education. Or maybe they have become withdrawn, their grades are slipping, or they are flat out living a reckless lifestyle, and you're concerned about their health and well-being. If this describes what your teen or young adult is facing, a therapeutic consultant may be able to help. Mental health, addiction recovery, and higher education can all be equally expensive. Well, information is everywhere. How do you know what option is the best one for your family? Some parents have the time to research and navigate this on their own. Some don't. If the latter applies to you, enter therapeutic consultants. Therapeutic consultants, like Joanna, listen to your family's specific needs and advocate on behalf of your loved one. TCs will research therapeutic resources, recommend treatment programs, and assist during adulthood transitions. Not being affiliated with any program, their support is completely objective and catered toward the best interest of each unique family. To find a qualified therapeutic consultant to work with, check out TCA, also known as the Therapeutic Consulting Association. Their website is therapeuticconsulting.org, all one word. Again, that's therapeuticconsulting.org. Then click the Find a Pro tab up at the top.